When watching films with CGI, we often have to suspend our belief and enjoy the moment. We also have to take into account when the film was made and what technological resources were available at the time. Yet, bad CGI is bad CGI regardless of the decade. It's up to the filmmakers to use it wisely or not. In this video, we'll highlight some of the worst CGI that's ever made it to the big screen, as well as some examples of the mesmerizing films that use CGI to transport us. At the turn of the millennium, directors and producers were confident that CGI technology was so advanced that anything was possible. This may have been the case for some action sequences, but others were just embarrassing. One example can be found in Die Another Day, which many consider to be the worst Bond film ever. Starring Pierce Brosnan no longer in his prime, the film is the 20th film in the series. It was released on the 14th anniversary of Bond's first appearance in Dr. No. Worst of all was the CGI. Considering the film cost $145 million to make, you would hope the special effects would be above average. But no. In one scene, known as Tsunami Kite Surfing Sequence, Bond looks visibly confused as he attempts to fight wind machines while gliding across the ocean, all with a glacier barreling down on him. The scene, which is absurd at every level, even includes the embarrassing line, "Global warming is a terrible thing." Well, granted, Bond films require the audience to suspend their belief at times. This scene, however, is so over the top that you can tell even the actors aren't buying it. In Justice League, the bad CGI isn't used in an action sequence. Instead, it's used on Henry Cavill's face. The actor, who was in the middle of filming Mission Impossible Fallout, was asked to put on his Superman costume again to reshoot some scenes. Cavill needed to keep the mustache he had grown for Mission Impossible, so Warner Brothers attempted to CGI out the facial hair. It was disastrous. Not only did Superman's face look distorted in the reshot scenes, it also looked like he had gotten some fillers. The reshoots were so bad that Cavill himself and director Zack Snyder mocked it. The actor famously made a video after filming Mission Impossible in which he said goodbye to King's stash. He commented, "It's hard for me to admit, this is not CGI. He's really gone. I can tell you this though, I will remember him, always." Meanwhile, Snyder, when told on Twitter that he should CGI his own mustache, he replied, "We all know that doesn't work." Needless to say, Justice League has gone on to be the least successful entry in the DC Extended Universe, which includes Wonder Woman, Suicide Squad, and Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. We blame the mustache. The three Fantastic Four movies have pretty bad CGI, but one scene stands out from the rest in terms of terribleness. In what is supposed to be a somewhat romantic exchange between Reed Richards and Sue Storm, Mr. Fantastic reveals his transformational superpowers. After delivering a particularly cheesy line, "I guess that's what you've always wanted, a stronger man," Richards transforms into a god-awful Wolverine. The transformation is not only unnecessary, it also makes everyone involved, Hugh Jackman included, look stupid. If you were ever wondering what your favorite superheroes would look like through the lens of a Snapchat filter, this is it. Although superhero films are noted for their action-packed CGI sequences, there are times when less is more, most especially when there's no action, only horrifying special effects. There is a reason the $100 million A Sound of Thunder has a 6% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. The film involves time tourists who accidentally interfere with the past and completely alter the present, aka the butterfly effect. It should have been a winner since it was based on a short story by sci-fi legend Ray Bradbury. The end result, however, was truly awful. The Boston Globe probably summarized it best when they said, "The combination of awful special effects and mediocre acting created this catastrophe." The film is a collection of truly horrendous CGI moments. The gleaming dinosaurs look like plastic toys, the underwater creatures and their effects look ridiculous, and the future has never looked more depressing. Interestingly, this was all apparent in the trailer, which probably convinced many to save their money. To add insult to injury, Ben Kingsley's horrendous hairpiece is the icing on an absolutely inedible cake. It's no wonder the film only made $11 million and bankrupted many of its producers. As they say, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. This was the case for The Matrix Reloaded, which overall is a good film. However, there is one terrible scene in the movie that stands out for its less than stellar CGI. The sequence in which Neo faces off against Agent Smith, who magically multiplies, leaves Neo to take out an endless onslaught of Smiths. Though the CGI is not completely terrible, it is so repetitive that it really reminds you that it is in fact just computer generated. Granted, it's hard to ask sci-fi action films to adhere to the philosophy that less is more, but in this scene, that is literally the problem. At the time, and perhaps in the theater, the scene may have worked, but today it looks dated. Watching Neo fight the many Agent Smiths was meant to be a key scene in The Matrix Reloaded, but looking at it now, it takes you out of the overall experience of the film. Air Force One, in general, has not aged well. In fact, some of the CGI scenes look like they were borrowed from the original Airplane movie, which, by the way, was released 20 years before. The film was a box office hit. It was about a terrorist group that hijacks Air Force One while the president, played by Steely Harrison Ford, tries to rescue everyone by retaking control of the plane. At the time, it was mostly met with positive reviews for its action sequences, yet some saw through the swagger. Adam Mars Jones of The Independent called the film, quote, so preposterous that it begins to seem like a science fiction artifact, the product of a parallel universe 1990s which somehow bypassed the decades since the 1950s. The film is also not served well in hindsight by its CGI, which looks cheesy. The ending shows this the most. In the final scene, the plane bounces off the water, takes a nosedive into the ocean, and breaks in half. Looking at it now, the scene is ridiculous and not even remotely believable. Get off my plane? More like, turn off this movie. Before The Lawnmower Man was released, the film was called Stephen King's The Lawnmower Man. But the author successfully sued the producers for attaching his name to the film, saying in court that the movie bore no meaningful resemblance to his story. This film is a case of terrible CGI through and through. As film critic Austin Trunick said, nowadays The Lawnmower Man's cyberspace looks like a budget PlayStation 2 title. Because the film delves into a world of virtual reality, there is no way it can stand the test of time. Computer technology evolves at lightning speed. There is even a video on YouTube that shows all the CGI scenes truncated together. The result, as one Reddit user said, might be the closest thing to hell you could experience. The Lawnmower Man won't be the only film in the 80s and 90s that will look incredibly bad as time goes on, but it is one of the worst. The Mummy Returns, which was just as successful as its predecessor, is one of those films that has long been forgotten. Described by Charles Taylor of Salon.com as, quote, everything the first Mummy was fun for not being. The film was notably Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's first big film, but the CGI used to create his character, the evil Scorpion King, was horrifying. The film, which ends with a fight between Brendan Fraser's character and a ridiculous giant scorpion with The Rock's upper torso CGI'd onto it, looks like a bad late 90s video game. Considering the producers had a budget of nearly $100 million, you would think that they would deliver something more believable than a plastic rendition of The Rock's head attached to a museum gift shop scorpion. The film is not only forgettable, it's somehow also unforgettable. In a world where Jaws exists, there is no reason to make another killer shark movie. We're looking at you, the Meg. Yet Renny Harlin, director of such duds as Cutthroat Island, Exorcist: The Beginning, The Legend of Hercules, and other Golden Raspberry nominated films, felt the compulsion to do so anyway. In the New York Times, Stephen Holden described Deep Blue Sea as a cut-rate Titanic stripped of romance and historical resonance and fused with Jaws, shorn of mythic symbolism and without complex characters. But in terms of CGI, the film suffers from the same problem as many other 90s films, which did not benefit from substandard technology. All you have to do to see how shoddy CGI didn't help the film is to compare the sharks in Deep Blue Sea with the animatronic shark of Jaws, which came out 24 years earlier. You'll wonder why they even bothered. Why this poorly received series necessitated another sequel is anyone's guess. First of all, this film wasn't even intended for the big screen, it was made for television. Surprisingly, David Hasselhoff is not the worst thing in Anaconda 3. The actual Anaconda is so awful that instead of a creature meant to be menacing, it induces uncontrollable laughter. On top of the serpent looking like a blown up plastic dollar store snake, for some reason it attacks and then mysteriously disappears from the screen. This means that the budget for the CGI was so low that they couldn't even keep the creature in the sequences. It's truly the worst of the worst. Let's move on to the best CGI. These films prove that it's not about the decade, but the dedication. The CGI effects in Terminator 2 were a turning point in the history of cinema. Though the CGI scenes only account for 5 minutes of the film, it took a team of 35 animators, technicians, and artists nearly 10 months to create. It's not surprising since the film was directed by James Cameron, who is also famous for being a perfectionist. To create a computer model of the face of the T-1000, the ILM team used laser scanning technology called CyberScan. They projected a laser beam across Robert Patrick's face and used video cameras to construct the 3D database. The team also studied Patrick's movement to make the scene where the T-1000 materializes from an explosion, revealing his liquid structure as genuine as possible. Not surprisingly, the team won the Oscar for Best Visual Effects in 1992. Again, dedication was key to create Peter Jackson's masterpiece, Lord of the Rings: The Two Towers. The CGI team drew more than 1,000 illustrations of Gollum to get the final rendering right. It was also the first that an actor's performance and computer animation were merged to create a realistic CGI movie character. The Gollum head alone consisted of over 2,600 polygons, mostly quads. At first, Jackson was only going to have actor Andy Serkis voice the character, but after seeing his facial expressions, the CGI team decided to scrap their first model and capture Serkis' movements instead. It was an epic moment in CGI history, which was expertly replicated when Serkis played Caesar in Rise of the Planet of the Apes. Another James Cameron winner, Avatar arguably has the most complex CGI effects sequence in history. The task was so daunting that several CGI firms had to be assembled to complete the task. Aside from a few blue screen shots of live-action actors, it is all CGI. The gunships, smoke trails, missiles, water, fire, an army of virtual characters, and a tree created with 20 million polygons, which had 1.2 million leaves, were computer generated. All the explosions were completely CGI as well, using a pioneering ILM technique. Although two teams worked 6,500 miles apart on varying scenes, the action works seamlessly. Finally, the 200+ shots of the home tree destruction set a new standard for CGI in the film industry. Again, leave it to Steven Spielberg to get it right. Rather than depending solely on CGI skills, ILM scanned parts of the model Brachiosaurus to develop patch meshes and use a custom program to create an overall mesh, which resulted in incredibly realistic dinosaurs, rather than plastic models. The team also created an app called Envelope that allowed the underlying points to be controlled, thereby creating the movement of the dinosaur's muscles under the skin. The resulting reveal of the dinosaur is a defining moment in film history. After bad-mouthing the Neo versus the Smith scene in Matrix Reloaded, we felt the need to atone and mention the film that started it all, The Matrix. Directed by Annie and Lana Wachowski, the CGI was created by Mannix Visual Effects. The result is not only one of the greatest CGI films in history, but also one of the greatest CGI sequences ever recorded. The bullet dodging scene's special effects is a time-rendered simulation that generates alterable speeds to show objects like flying bullets in slow motion. Using a photography technique known as time-slice photography, in which numerous cameras are triggered around an object simultaneously, the final result was two-dimensional shots of a three-dimensional sequence. The film deservedly went on to win the Oscar for Best Visual Effects in 2000. Films with bad CGI are a dime a dozen. As time goes by, our expectations as filmgoers grow. Granted, 30 years ago, a film like E.T. appeared convincing, but nowadays, we expect a little bit more bang for our buck. Therefore, it would be nice if filmmakers took the time to deliver something believable, rather than churning out drivel that is not doing them or their audience any favors. Let us know which films amazed you and which had you ditching the popcorn and leaving the theater in the comments below. And while you're down there, don't forget to subscribe to The Binger for more great content like this. Thanks for watching, and we hope to see you at the movies.